Prologue. Selena Blackwood stood at the edge of the Silver Moon Pack's sacred clearing, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through her ribs. The full moon hung above like a silent witness, its silvery glow bathing the ancient stone altar in light that should have felt holy. But tonight the air was thick with the weight of betrayal. She shouldn't be here. Not yet. The mating ceremony wasn't supposed to start for another hour, but something had pulled her here early, a creeping unease that wouldn't let her breathe until she saw him, until she saw Lucas, her fated mate, the one the moon goddess herself had chosen for her. Her entire life had been building to this moment. She had spent weeks preparing for the ceremony, weeks dreaming about the way he would look at her when he vowed to protect and cherish her before the entire pack. Her father had given his blessing. The elders had called it destiny. Selena had called it love. But now her feet felt heavy as she stepped closer. The sound of voices, soft, low, intimate, drifting from behind the altar. And then she heard it. A laugh. Not Lucas's laugh. A woman's laugh, soft and throaty, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone being kissed. Her wolf stirred uneasily beneath her skin. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. Selena's fingers trembled as she crept closer, her heart pounding like a war drum in her ears. She peeked around the edge of the altar, and the world shattered. Lucas, her mate, the man she had loved since childhood, the man who had sworn under the moonlight that she was his one and only. He stood there, his broad, familiar shoulders tense, his hands tangled in the dark hair of another woman as he kissed her like she was his oxygen and he was drowning. Selena froze, her lungs locked. The earth might as well have crumbled beneath her feet because she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch as the man she loved betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. The other woman, a stunning, sharp-eyed beta female named Marissa, smirked as if she knew Selena was watching. She tilted her head back, giving Selena a full view of Lucas's hand gripping her waist possessively. Something inside Selena cracked. It wasn't just the bond between them. It was her. The future she had imagined, the love, the mating bond, the pack leadership they were supposed to share, dissolved in an instant, leaving behind a hollow ache that threatened to swallow her whole. Lucas. Her voice broke before she could stop it. He froze. Slowly he turned, his eyes widening as he saw her standing there, the moonlight turning the tears on her cheeks into silver trails. "Selena," he began, but she couldn't hear him, because in that exact moment, the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent so sharp, so foreign, so utterly wrong, that every hair on her body stood on end. Danger. She didn't know where it came from, but she felt it like a physical blow. The shadows between the trees moved. And then they attacked. Dark figures burst into the clearing, claws glinting, eyes glowing red, faster than anything Selena had ever seen. Rogues. Dozens of them, teeth bared, surrounding the altar in a vicious snarl of fur and fury. Selena barely had time to scream before one leapt at her. Pain exploded across her shoulder as claws tore into her flesh. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. Lucas shifted into his wolf, leaping into the fray, but it wasn't enough. There were too many of them. The rogues weren't here for the pack, they were here for her. She felt it in her bones. Another rogue lunged, jaws snapping for her throat. And that was when he appeared. A black wolf, massive and terrifying, slammed into the attacker mid-air, breaking its neck with a single snap. He was bigger than any wolf she had ever seen, his fur like midnight, his eyes glowing with the kind of golden fire that made the rogues hesitate. He moved through them like death itself, each strike precise, brutal, leaving bodies in his wake. And when the last rogue fell, bleeding into the dirt, the massive black wolf turned toward her. Selena's breath caught. The wolf shifted, and standing before her was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. His eyes, golden and feral, locked on her with an intensity that made her feel naked. Ethan Stormrider, the alpha billionaire lord, feared by every pack across the continent. He looked at her once, just once, then he said, voice low and rough, "Come with me if you want to live." Chapter 1. The night didn't end with the slaughter. It ended with him. Selena stood in the middle of the blood-soaked clearing, her legs trembling, her dress torn, the faint sting of rogue claws still burning across her shoulder. The sacred altar lay in ruins behind her, the mating ceremony that was supposed to unite her with Lucas now nothing more than ashes and ghosts. And before her stood Ethan Stormrider, the alpha billionaire lord himself. He looked like he had walked out of some forbidden dream. 6'4", shoulders broad enough to block the moonlight, dressed in a tailored black coat that clung to a frame built from power and dominance. Dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that looked almost careless. But there was nothing careless about the way he carried himself. He radiated control, strength, authority, and danger. So much danger. Those golden eyes pinned her in place, as though he could see right through her skin, past the shredded remains of her heart, down to the soul beneath. She tried to speak, to ask him who he was, why he had been here, what he wanted. But all she managed was a broken whisper, Why did you help me?" Ethan stepped closer. The ground seemed to shift with him. Even the wind paused, as if the entire forest held its breath. "Because," he said, voice smooth as velvet over steel, "you were about to die." He said it like it was simple, like he had just rescued some nameless girl from a mugging, not single-handedly ripped through a dozen feral rogues in less than 5 minutes. But there was nothing simple about the way he looked at her. Nothing simple about the way his gaze flicked briefly toward Lucas, bleeding, trembling, panting in wolf form on the ground, before coming back to her like he had already decided something. "You're coming with me," Ethan said. Selena's mouth fell open. "What? You're not safe here. They were after you. More will come." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Selena took a step back, her instincts warring inside her. She didn't know this man. She didn't trust him. But there was something in his presence, raw, magnetic, unshakable, that made her pulse stutter in ways that had nothing to do with fear. Lucas shifted back into human form, stumbling toward her. His dark hair was matted with blood, his chest streaked with claw marks, his eyes wide with regret and panic. "Selena," he rasped, reaching for her hand, "don't listen to him. Come with me. I can protect you." Ethan didn't even look at him. He just moved one step closer to her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His voice dropped lower, quieter, but filled with enough dominance to make her wolf stir beneath her skin like a trembling flame. "Lucas couldn't protect you tonight," he said softly, as if they were the only two people in the world. "And he won't protect you tomorrow. But I can." Selena's throat tightened. He was right. She hated that he was right. Lucas had betrayed her, shattered her. And then when death came for her, he had barely managed to stay alive himself. But this man, this terrifying, powerful alpha she had only ever heard whispers about, had slaughtered her attackers without breaking a sweat. "Why me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Those golden eyes caught hers like they were a snare. "Because," he said, with the calm certainty of someone stating a fact rather than a promise, "you're mine now." The words hit her like a spark to dry kindling. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her breath caught, and before she could even form a reply, Ethan turned to one of his men, dark-suited enforcers she hadn't even noticed arriving until now, and said, "Get her out of here. My car. Now." Selena sat in the back of a sleek black SUV, arms wrapped around herself as the trees blurred past the tinted windows. The car smelled faintly of leather and cedarwood, with an undertone of something uniquely him, a dark, expensive scent she couldn't name but couldn't stop breathing in. Ethan sat beside her, silent, radiating the kind of calm power that made it impossible to look away for long. Outside, the forest thinned. City lights appeared in the distance. Selena's mind was a storm. Lucas's betrayal, the rogues, this stranger, this alpha lord, sweeping into her life like a hurricane and deciding she belonged to him. She should have been furious, terrified, something, but all she felt was hollow, like everything she had known, her pack, her mate, her future, had been ripped away, leaving nothing but the heat of his presence beside her. "You live far from here?" she asked finally, her voice soft. Ethan didn't look at her. "Far enough," he said. "My estate is secure. No one will touch you there." "And after that?" This time he did look at her. After that, he said slowly, we'll talk about why they wanted you dead. Selena shivered. Because he wasn't guessing. He wasn't wondering. He knew there was a reason, and deep down, so did she. The car rolled up a long, winding driveway lined with black iron gates and ancient pines. At the top of the hill, illuminated by moonlight and golden lanterns, sprawled a mansion that looked less like a home and more like a fortress carved from old money and older power. Stormrider Estate. Selena had heard rumors, whispers of the reclusive alpha billionaire lord who ruled his territory with an iron fist, whose wealth rivaled human royalty, whose enemies tended to vanish without a trace, and now she was stepping into his world. Ethan led her inside. The air smelled of polished wood and smoke. Wolves in tailored suits lingered in the hallways, bowing slightly as he passed. Selena felt eyes on her, curious, assessing, but none dared speak. He led her to a room bigger than her entire house back in the Silver Moon Pack. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. Tall windows overlooked the dark forest below. You'll stay here tonight, Ethan said. Selena turned to face him. And then what? Ethan's gaze locked on hers, steady, unreadable. Then, he said softly, you'll tell me everything about your pack, your mate, and why someone wants you dead badly enough to send an army after you. He took a step closer, close enough that she felt the heat radiating off him, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like smoke in midnight rain. And until we have answers, he murmured, his voice dropping lower, you don't leave my side. Ever. Selena's heart stumbled. Because there was something in his tone that didn't sound like just protection. It sounded like possession. Chapter 2. The fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, filling the room with a warm golden glow that contrasted sharply with the cold storm brewing inside Selena's chest. She stood near the tall windows, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the endless stretch of forest below Stormrider Estate. The mansion sat like a king on its throne at the top of the hill, miles from civilization, surrounded by walls and security gates, an island of power in the middle of nowhere, a prison, or a sanctuary. She wasn't sure yet. Behind her she could hear Ethan moving, slow, deliberate movements, pouring himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the side table, setting the glass down with a soft clink. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud, heavy and electric. Sit, he said finally, his deep voice breaking the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was a command. Selena turned, bristling before she could stop herself. I'm not your pack member. You don't get to order me around. Golden eyes met hers, steady, unblinking. You're under my roof, Ethan said simply. Until we know who sent those rogues after you, this place is the only thing standing between you and a shallow grave. So yes, I do get to tell you what to do if it keeps you alive. Selena's hands clenched at her sides. She hated that he was right, hated that she needed his protection at all. She hated Lucas even more, Lucas who had betrayed her. Lucas, whose touch had once made her heart race but now only made her feel cold and used. She sat, not because Ethan told her to, at least that's what she told herself. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the room and handed her a glass of water. Selena blinked. She'd expected whiskey, or something laced with dominance and sharp edges, the way everything else about him was. But no, just water. She took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. Heat shot up her arm at the contact, startling in its intensity. She glanced at him sharply, but Ethan was already turning away, taking his own drink to the chair across from hers. He sat with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to raise its voice to be obeyed. Tell me everything, he said. Selena stared at the fire. My pack, she began slowly, was preparing for my mating ceremony tonight. Mating ceremony? She swallowed hard. Yes, to Lucas Nightshade. My fated mate. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but something flickered in those golden eyes at the name. Go on, he said finally. Selena clenched her hands in her lap. Before it even began, I found him with someone else. Another woman. The words tasted like ashes, and then the rogues attacked. They came straight for me, like they knew exactly where I would be. Ethan leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. The firelight threw sharp lines across his face, making him look carved from darkness and something older than time. That's not random, he said finally. Selena looked up. What do you mean? Rogues don't just attack a pack's sacred grounds unless someone pays them to. Or unless they think the target is worth the risk. Target? He nodded slowly, swirling the liquid in his glass. Someone wants you dead. The question is why? Selena shivered. She thought about the way the rogues had come straight for her, about Lucas's betrayal, about the way Marissa had smirked when she caught Selena watching them together, as if she already knew the ceremony would never happen. And for the first time, a cold, horrible thought slithered through her mind. What if the attack hadn't been a coincidence? What if Lucas had known? Before she could speak, Ethan's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Until we find out who's behind this, you stay here," he said. Selena's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me." He set his glass down and leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, gaze locking on hers like a predator scenting prey. "This estate is secure. My men are the best. Whoever sent those rogues won't get through my defenses." Selena shook her head. "I can't just stay here. My pack will wonder where I am." "Your pack will hear you're safe," Ethan said flatly. "I've already sent word." Selena stared. "You... what?" He didn't even blink. "You're under my protection now." Something in his tone made her pulse skip. It wasn't just protective. It was possessive. And it sent a strange, heated flutter through her chest she didn't want to examine too closely. "This isn't a negotiation," Ethan said softly. "You stay here. You don't leave my side until I say so. And in return..." He let the sentence hang, unfinished. Selena swallowed. "In return?" His gaze darkened, something dangerous flickering there. "In return, I keep you alive." The air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken. Selena couldn't look away. Hours later, when Ethan finally left the room to speak with his men, Selena paced the length of the suite he'd given her. She couldn't sleep. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Lucas's betrayal, the rogues, Ethan's commanding presence, his promise to protect her, and underneath it all, the heat of his gaze on her, the memory of his voice when he said, "You're mine now." Selena shook her head hard. No, she wasn't his. She wouldn't belong to anyone ever again. But as the storm rolled in outside, lightning flashing over the dark forest, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. Something dangerous, something inevitable. And that whatever bargain she had just stepped into with the alpha billionaire lord might cost her far more than she realized. Chapter 3. The storm broke at midnight. Rain lashed against the tall windows of Stormrider Estate, lightning splitting the sky in jagged streaks of white fire. Thunder rolled like a drumbeat across the hills, shaking the earth itself. Selena sat curled in the window seat of her suite, her knees drawn to her chest, watching the storm rage over the forest below. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, pale, exhausted, eyes haunted by too many emotions to name. She hadn't slept, not after everything that had happened, not after finding Lucas with Marissa, not after the rogues tearing through the ceremony, not after Ethan Stormrider stepping out of the darkness like some avenging wolf god and claiming she now belonged under his protection. Protection. The word sounded like safety. But when Ethan said it, it felt like something else. Something deeper, something dangerous. Selena's fingers tightened around the blanket she'd wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't know this man. Didn't know what he wanted beyond his promise to keep her alive. But when he looked at her with those molten gold eyes, she couldn't help the shiver that ran down her spine. A knock at the door made her jump. Before she could answer, the door opened, and Ethan himself stepped inside. He filled the doorway like he filled every room, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark shirt rolled at the sleeves, his presence swallowing the space whole. His eyes swept the room once before landing on her. "You haven't slept," he said, voice low, calm, but threaded with something that made her chest tighten. Selena bristled before she could stop herself. "You seem very sure of what I have or haven't done." "I don't guess." He closed the door behind him, the soft click echoing far louder than it should have. "I can hear your heartbeat from the hall." Her mouth went dry. Of course. He was alpha. His senses would be sharper than hers. He moved toward the fireplace, tossing a few more logs onto the dying flames before striking a match. The room glowed with fresh heat and light as fire roared back to life. "Storm's knocking out the perimeter cameras. Ethan said, as though discussing the weather, though his eyes glinted sharply in the firelight. But my men are patrolling the grounds. No one gets in without my permission. Selena's brow furrowed. You think they'll come back? He turned, leaning one hand on the mantel. If someone sent them once, they'll send them again. The air seemed to thicken between them. Selena swallowed, her voice softer than she meant it to be. And you'll keep me safe? It wasn't quite a question. Ethan studied her for a long moment before saying, simply, yes. The word carried the weight of an oath. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. But inside the estate, tension twisted like a coiled spring. Selena was in the library, a cavernous room filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves, dust motes dancing in the sunlight. When she heard raised voices near the front gates, she froze, straining to listen. Then a familiar voice cut through the air like a blade. "Selena, I know you're in there." "Lucas." Her chest tightened painfully. She hadn't seen him since last night, since his betrayal. Footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and purposeful. A moment later, Ethan appeared in the library doorway. His expression was unreadable, but the faint tension in his jaw told her everything. "Your ex-mate is at my gates," Ethan said flatly, "demanding to see you." Selena's pulse kicked hard. Ex-mate. The words shouldn't sting. Lucas had betrayed her, shattered her. She owed him nothing. And yet... "Do you want to see him?" Ethan asked. His tone was careful, controlled. But there was something under it. Something sharp and possessive. Selena hesitated. She wanted answers, wanted to look Lucas in the eye and ask him why, but she also wanted to slam the door in his face and never speak to him again. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "I can send him away," he said. "One word from you, and he won't set foot on my land." Selena looked up at him, at the way his shoulders filled the doorway, at the controlled danger coiled beneath his skin, and she realized something. Ethan Stormrider didn't just protect what was his, he owned it, and right now, he was looking at her like she was already his. Selena drew a shaky breath. "I'll see him." Ethan's jaw flexed once, but he nodded. 5 minutes, he said, "and I'll be there." Lucas looked like hell. He stood in the gravel courtyard, hair disheveled, clothes torn from the rogue attack, eyes bloodshot with lack of sleep. When he saw Selena step outside, his whole face softened with relief. "Selena," he breathed, moving toward her. "Thank the goddess you're alive. I was so worried." She held up a hand. "Stop." Lucas froze. Selena's voice shook, but she forced the words out. "I saw you. With her, before the ceremony. Was any of it real, Lucas? Anything at all?" His face crumpled. "Selena, please, I made a mistake. I was drunk, Don't." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare stand there and lie to me." He flinched. Before he could speak again, Ethan stepped out of the shadows like he'd been waiting for this moment. He came to stand beside Selena, tall and immovable, his presence a wall of heat and power at her back. "This conversation is over," Ethan said coldly. "You had your chance. You blew it. Now she's under my protection." Lucas's eyes burned with fury. "She's not yours, Stormrider." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "She is now." The air between the two alphas crackled, dominance rolling off them like thunder. Selena stood frozen between them, heart hammering, because deep down she knew this wasn't just about protection anymore. This was about possession, and something told her Ethan Stormrider didn't share. That night, Selena sat by the fire again, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Lucas was gone, but his words lingered. So did Ethan's. "You're mine now." Selena shivered, even though the room was warm, because part of her hated the idea of belonging to anyone again. But another part, the part that remembered his golden eyes, the way his voice slid over her like dark velvet, wasn't sure she wanted to fight him. Not yet. Chapter 4. The moon was a silver coin in the night sky, glowing through thin veils of mist as if watching the world below with quiet, ancient judgment. Selena couldn't sleep. She lay beneath the softest silk sheets she had ever touched, staring up at the carved ceiling of the guest suite in Stormrider Estate, listening to the low crackle of the fire in the hearth. She should have been exhausted. Her body ached from the rogue attack. Her heart still felt like broken glass inside her chest after Lucas's betrayal. The confrontation at the gates this morning had left her shaking for hours. And yet, it wasn't just the memories keeping her awake, it was him. The way Ethan Stormrider had stood beside her when Lucas tried to beg his way back into her life. The way his voice had dropped to that dark, dangerous tone when he told Lucas she was under his protection. The way those golden eyes had burned when they looked at her. Like he was already planning what he would do to anyone who tried to take her from him. Selena pressed a hand to her racing heart. It wasn't safe, the way she reacted to him. And yet, she couldn't stop. A soft knock on the door made her sit up. Before she could answer, the door opened, and there he was. Ethan Stormrider, alpha billionaire lord, dressed in dark trousers and a simple black shirt that did nothing to hide the sheer power of the man beneath. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, revealing veins and muscle, the faintest scars from battles long past. He filled the doorway like a shadow, his presence rolling through the room in a wave that made her pulse stumble. Selena pulled the sheet tighter around herself. "It's the middle of the night." "I know," Ethan said, voice low, smooth, the kind of tone that made the air itself seem to still. "Then why are you here?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "I can't sleep," he said simply. Selena blinked. "So you came to wake me up instead?" The corner of his mouth almost curved. "Almost." "No," he said, moving toward the fireplace and tossing in another log before crouching to light it. "I came because the security team found fresh tracks on the north perimeter. Wolf tracks." Selena stiffened. "Rogues?" "Maybe," Ethan said, standing again, the firelight painting sharp lines across his face. "Or maybe someone testing our defenses. Either way, I don't like it." He turned, those golden eyes locking on her like a physical touch. "You're not leaving my sight until we find out who's behind this." Selena frowned. "Ethan, you can't just—" "I can." His voice cut through hers like steel through silk. "Because until I know you're safe, I don't sleep, I don't eat, I don't stop." There was something in his tone that made her breath catch. It wasn't just protective, it was possessive. And beneath that, something darker, something hungrier. Selena swallowed hard. "Why? Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides, until he was standing right in front of her bed. He leaned down slightly, his gaze locking on hers, his voice dropping so low it slid through her like smoke. "Because I don't let anyone touch what's mine." Selena's pulse stuttered. "I'm not yours," she whispered. Golden eyes glinted. "Not yet." The next evening, Ethan kept his word. Selena didn't leave his side. He had a private war room in the mansion, a sleek, modern space lined with security screens, maps of the territory, and an oval table where his lieutenants gathered to discuss everything from rogue movements to business holdings. Selena sat quietly in the corner, feeling out of place in a room full of alphas and betas radiating power. Ethan stood at the head of the table, arms folded, voice calm but sharp as he gave orders. "Double the patrols on the north and east borders. Rotate the night shifts. I want fresh eyes every 3 hours. And find out who the hell is paying these rogues to cross into my territory." "Yes, Alpha," his men said in unison. Selena watched him, unable to look away. This was a man used to command, a man used to power. The room bent around him like iron around a magnet. And yet every so often his gaze would flick to her, like he was checking, like he needed to know she was still there. She didn't know how to feel about that. Safe? Trapped? Both? But any further thoughts vanished when the alarms went off. Red lights strobed along the walls, wolves shifted instantly, claws and fangs flashing as a voice crackled over the intercom. "Perimeter breach. South gate." Ethan was already moving. "Get her to the safe room," he snapped at 2 of his betas. But before they could even reach her, the first explosion shook the estate. Smoke curled through the hallways. Wolves barked orders as the estate went into lockdown. Selena ran with Ethan down a narrow staircase toward the reinforced basement level, heart hammering. She didn't even realize until later that he never left her hand the whole time. They reached the safe room, a steel door embedded in concrete walls, the kind of place built to withstand bombs if necessary. Ethan shoved her inside first, then turned to his men. "Hold the line. Kill anyone who gets past the gates." "Alpha," they growled, vanishing into the smoke. Ethan locked the door and turned to face her. The room was dim, lit only by a single overhead bulb. Selena's pulse raced as he crossed to the weapons cabinet, loading a gun with calm, precise movements. He looked like a warlord preparing for battle. But when he turned back to her, there was something else in his eyes, something fierce, something primal. "Nobody," he said softly, like a vow carved from stone, "is taking you from me. Nobody." And for the first time, Selena wasn't sure he was just talking about the rogues. Chapter 5. The estate was chaos above them. Selena could hear it, the distant, muffled echoes of wolves snarling, men shouting orders, the faint tremble of explosions as if the world outside were shaking apart. But down here, in the safe room, time felt frozen. The door was steel and bolted shut. The walls were reinforced concrete. A faint hum filled the air from the ventilation system, and then there was Ethan Stormrider. He stood near the weapons cabinet, that gun still in his hand, golden eyes gleaming under the stark light. His shoulders were broad, powerful, his presence filling the entire room like a living shield. Selena pressed her back to the cool wall, trying to calm her breathing. She hated this feeling of being trapped, dependent on someone else to fight her battles. She wasn't weak, she wasn't helpless, but she also wasn't blind. She had seen the way the rogues attacked before, how fast, how ruthless they were. Whoever was sending them had resources, strategy. This wasn't random. And deep down, she knew this was about more than her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She felt it. Something about her was at the center of this. "Are you hurt?" Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts, smooth and low but with an edge sharp enough to draw blood. She blinked, realizing he was watching her like a hawk. "No," she managed, shaking her head. He set the gun down on the cabinet and crossed to her, each step slow, measured. Selena's pulse jumped when he stopped just a few feet away, close enough that she could feel the heat rolling off him. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm not," she started to protest, but her voice betrayed her. Ethan reached out, his hand closed around hers, large and warm, his grip firm but not harsh. The moment his skin touched hers, she felt it again. That jolt, that strange electric pull that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with him. "It's okay," he said, softer this time. "You're safe here." Safe. She almost laughed at the word. Because, yes, physically, she was behind steel walls with the most dangerous alpha in the region guarding her. But emotionally, she didn't feel safe at all. Not when he looked at her like that, like he was peeling away every wall she had left, layer by layer. Not when he stood so close she could smell the faint leather and cedar scent of him, masculine and wild all at once. Not when his thumb brushed absently over the back of her hand like he didn't even realize he was doing it. Selena yanked her hand back before she forgot how to breathe. "We can't just sit here," she said, her voice coming out sharper than intended. "What if they break through? What if someone gets hurt because I'm down here hiding like—" "Stop." One word, low, commanding. Her mouth snapped shut before she even realized she had obeyed. Ethan's gaze burned into hers. "I have men trained for this. They know what they're doing. And until I've dealt with whoever's behind this, your only job is to stay alive. Do you understand?" Selena swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Do you?" he pressed, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Yes," she whispered, but inside, something warred with her. Because the way he said it, stay alive, felt heavier than it should. Like maybe she wasn't just some civilian in the crossfire. Like maybe he knew something she didn't. It felt like hours before the chaos above began to fade. The snarling stopped. The shouts dulled to low voices. Finally, there was a knock at the safe room door. Alpha, one of Ethan's betas called. Perimeter secure, no survivors. Selena flinched at the last part. Ethan opened the door slowly, his eyes scanning the hallway before jerking his chin toward the guards. "Full report in the war room in 5. Get the medic team on standby." "Yes, Alpha." Selena followed him out, her legs shaky, her mind spinning. The mansion was a mess, windows shattered, walls scorched, debris scattered across the marble floors. Wolves in torn clothes and bloodied skin were shifting back into human form, murmuring updates as they passed. Ethan didn't slow down. He led her straight upstairs to a quieter wing of the estate, his hand on her back like a silent order to keep moving. She didn't protest, not when she saw the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Not when she heard the low growl in his chest when someone mentioned rogue scouts carrying silver weapons. Something no random mercenary should have access to. This wasn't random at all. Someone wanted her dead. Later, after the war room meeting, Ethan found her on the balcony outside the guest suite. Selena stood under the cold moonlight, arms wrapped around herself, staring out over the dark forest beyond the estate walls. She didn't hear him approach until he spoke. "You should be asleep," he said. Selena turned, her hair catching the moonlight. Kind of hard after tonight. Ethan leaned against the railing beside her, his presence like a shadow wrapping around her. "We'll find out who's behind this," he said. But Selena shook her head. "You don't get it. This isn't about your territory or some random attack. They came for me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know." Selena froze. He looked at her then, golden eyes fierce. "You think I haven't figured that out? They weren't after my men, or my land. They wanted you." His hand gripped the railing, metal groaning under his strength. "And I'm going to find out why," he vowed, voice like a promise carved in stone. "But until then, Selena, you don't go anywhere without me. Not one step, not one breath. Until this is over, you stay under my protection." His words should have scared her. They didn't. Instead, a strange heat curled low in her chest at the way he said "my protection," like it was more than a command, like it was a claim. Back in her room, long after he left, Selena lay awake thinking about everything. The attack, the rogues, the way Ethan had stood in front of her like he'd tear apart the entire world if it came too close, and the way, when he looked at her, she felt like maybe, just maybe, part of her wanted him to. Chapter 6. Morning came slowly to Stormrider Estate. The air was sharp and cold, the kind of autumn chill that crept in through cracks of stone and glass no matter how many fires roared inside. The mansion stood silent after the chaos of last night, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet after a storm, the kind that hummed with tension, like lightning waiting to strike again. Selena hadn't slept. Not after the attack. Not after the way Ethan had stood in that war room like a king about to declare war on the entire world for what happened. Not after the way he'd looked at her when he said she was staying under his protection. Those golden eyes haunted her. Part of her wanted to run from them. The other part... Selena pushed the thought away, wrapping her shawl tighter around herself as she stood at the window of the guest suite, watching the sun rise over the forest. Somewhere out there, beyond the borders, werewolves were plotting her death. And she didn't even know why. By the time she made her way downstairs, the estate was already awake. Wolves in both human and shifted forms moved through the halls with weapons strapped across their backs, voices low but urgent. The war room was worse. Ethan stood at the center, a map spread across the table before him, his lieutenants clustered around like generals preparing for battle. Selena paused at the door, watching him. He was dressed in black again, tailored pants, crisp shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He didn't look like the billionaire alpha lord who ruled the region with cold, ruthless precision. He looked like a predator in human skin, one who hadn't slept either. 3 rogue scouts survived the perimeter fight, one of his betas reported, his voice grim. But they used poison, silver-laced blades. None lived long enough to talk. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then find out where they came from. Someone supplying them. Someone who knows this territory better than they should. Selena's stomach twisted. They were dying just to get to her. Why? And then Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts. "You," he said, eyes locking on her like a predator spotting prey. "With me." Selena froze. "Me?" "Yes," he said, already striding toward the door. "Now." He didn't explain as she followed him down the hall. Ethan led her to a lower wing she hadn't seen before, stone walls, torches flickering against old concrete. It smelled faintly of metal and earth. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. "An older part of the estate," he said. "It's where we handle problems." Selena swallowed. "What kind of problems?" He didn't answer, until they reached the end of the hall. A guard opened a heavy steel door, and inside, chained to the wall, was a man. No, a wolf. His eyes glowed faint yellow, his skin pale, blood crusted along one side of his face. He snarled when he saw Ethan, but there was fear in it. Selena froze in the doorway. "I thought they said none survived." "One did," Ethan said softly, his voice like velvet over steel. "Barely." He walked inside, his steps slow, deliberate, radiating alpha dominance that filled the whole room. The rogue bared his teeth. Kill me, Stormrider, won't talk. Ethan crouched in front of him, unbothered. You will. The wolf spat blood at his feet. Selena flinched. Ethan didn't. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping so low Selena barely heard it. Who sent you after her? The rogue's eyes flicked to Selena, then back to Ethan. She dies tonight, he rasped, his voice broken but defiant. Moon goddess curse her. She dies. Ethan moved so fast Selena barely saw it. One moment he was crouched. The next, his hand was at the rogue's throat, slamming him back against the wall with a snarl that shook the room. You don't speak her name, Ethan growled, voice low. Dangerous. Not unless you want your last breath to be in pieces. The rogue's eyes went wide. Even chained, he trembled under the weight of Ethan's fury. Selena did too, because this wasn't just rage, it was personal. Like the thought of her dying wasn't just a threat to his territory, it was something far deeper. When Ethan finally stepped back, the rogue was gasping, eyes wide, chest heaving. Ethan didn't look at him again. Instead, he turned to Selena. His voice was still rough when he spoke, but steadier now. This won't stop, he said. Whoever's behind this isn't sending scouts anymore. They'll send armies if they have to. They want you dead, Selena. She shivered. But why? I don't even... We'll find out, he cut in. I swear to you, we will. Then he stepped closer, too close. Selena felt her breath catch when his hand rose, not to grab her, not to cage her, but to brush a single strand of hair from her face. I swear on my life, Ethan murmured, voice dropping low. I won't let them touch you. Not while I'm breathing, not while I'm standing. Selena's heart pounded so hard it hurt, because there was something in the way he said it, like a vow not just from an alpha lord, but from a man who was crossing a line neither of them had admitted existed until now. Back upstairs, the estate was quieter, but Selena couldn't stop replaying that moment in her head. The way his fingers had brushed her cheek, the promise in his voice. The way, for one terrifying, thrilling heartbeat, she'd wanted to lean into his touch instead of pulling away. And for the first time, she wondered if Ethan Stormrider's vow to protect her was about more than just duty. Maybe it was about her. Chapter 7. The sun barely made it above the tree line before the clouds swallowed it whole, turning the sky to a dull, heavy gray. The air smelled of rain, of wet earth and pine. Selena stood on the balcony outside her guest suite, arms folded tightly as the wind tossed her hair. She watched the forest stretching out in all directions, rolling hills of red and gold leaves fading into black evergreens. It looked peaceful from here, but she knew better. Somewhere out there, beyond those trees, was someone who wanted her dead badly enough to send wave after wave of rogues into Stormrider territory. She didn't even know why, and neither did Ethan. That was the part that scared her most, because if he didn't know, then whoever was behind this was powerful enough to keep secrets from the alpha billionaire lord himself. Selena tightened her shawl around her shoulders. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of last night. The snarling rogues, the safe room, the way Ethan's voice had gone low and rough when he vowed not to let anyone touch her. She couldn't shake that look in his eyes, the one that wasn't just protective, it was something else. Something darker, something that made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to name. The Stormrider estate was massive, endless hallways lined with oil paintings, carved wooden doors, staircases spiraling toward balconies overlooking glittering chandeliers. Selena wandered until she found herself in the library. It was enormous, floor-to-ceiling shelves, ladders on rails, a massive fireplace with 2 leather chairs in front of it. But what caught her attention were the books on the far wall. Old books, ancient, leather-bound tomes covered in dust, titles in languages she didn't recognize. She ran her fingers along the spines until one name made her pause, the Blood Moon Prophecy. Selena pulled it down slowly, brushing dust from the cover. The book creaked open, pages yellowed and brittle. She didn't understand most of it. Half the words were in an older dialect of the wolf tongue she'd only heard in bits and pieces growing up. But she understood enough. The blood moon, the moon goddess, a blessing and a curse, passed down through certain bloodlines. Bloodlines like hers. Selena's throat tightened. Her grandmother used to whisper things when she thought Selena was asleep. Things about old magic in their family. Things about power that skipped generations, but she'd never believed it, She wished she still didn't. You shouldn't be reading that. Selena nearly dropped the book. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes sharp as gold under the dim library lights. He filled the room the way he always did, like air bent around him, like shadows obeyed him. Selena closed the book slowly. Why? Afraid I might actually find out what's going on. He didn't smile. Because half of what's in that book is superstition mixed with fact. Hard to tell which is which. She met his gaze evenly. And the other half? For a moment he didn't answer. Then he pushed off the doorframe, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. The other half, he said quietly, is dangerous if the wrong people realize it's true. Selena's grip on the book tightened. What exactly do you know, Ethan? He stopped just a few feet from her. I know, he said, his voice low and steady, that whoever's after you isn't just trying to kill you. They're trying to erase something. A bloodline, a prophecy. A power tied to the moon goddess herself. Selena's breath caught. And you think that's me? His eyes locked on hers. I don't think, he said. I know. They sat by the fire as the storm outside rolled in, thunder shaking the windows while rain lashed against the glass. Ethan told her what he knew. How the blood moon came once every century, marking those born under it with either a blessing or a curse, depending on who told the story. How those marked were said to have the power to unite the packs, or destroy them. How every major wolf war in history had started, or ended, with a blood moon heir. And how Selena, with her grandmother's bloodline and her birth under the last blood moon, fit the prophecy too perfectly to be coincidence. Selena stared into the fire, the heat doing nothing to thaw the cold spreading through her chest. So they want me dead, she whispered, to stop the prophecy. Ethan's voice was low, rough, or because they want control of it. Either way, you're the key. She turned to look at him. And what about you? She asked softly. Why do you care so much, Ethan? Because I'm some prophecy piece on your chessboard? Or because you don't like losing? For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. Then he leaned closer, firelight turning his golden eyes molten. I care, he said slowly, like each word cost him something. Because the thought of them touching you makes me want to burn this whole world down. Selena's breath hitched. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, quiet, certain, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. Thunder shook the windows again. Neither of them moved. Ethan's gaze stayed locked on hers, intense enough to make her pulse race. Selena knew she should look away. She didn't. For one long, breathless moment, the air between them felt electric, charged with danger, and something far more dangerous. Something that had nothing to do with prophecies or bloodlines or rogue attacks. Something that made her wonder what would happen if she leaned forward just a little. The door slammed open. Alpha! One of Ethan's betas barked, breathless. Scouts found a camp in the southern woods, half a mile from the border. Looks like they've been there for days. Ethan stood instantly, all alpha business again. Gear up, we leave in 10. The beta nodded and vanished. Selena rose too. I'm coming with you. Ethan turned, expression sharp. No, you're not. You said this is about me, she snapped. If they're hunting me, then I'm not sitting here like some helpless prisoner while you are not coming, he said again, low and final, like an alpha giving an unbreakable order. Selena clenched her fists, furious, but deep down, part of her wasn't sure if she was angry because he was protecting her, or because some reckless, treacherous part of her wanted to see what he'd do if she defied him. Chapter 8. The storm rolled in hard and fast, swallowing the forest in sheets of rain and wind that bent the trees like bowing servants. Ethan's warriors moved like shadows through the storm, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, as they shifted between wolf and human form, tracking scents that cut through the wet earth and pine. Selena wasn't supposed to be here, she knew that. Ethan had made it clear, his voice sharp, his command absolute, that she was to stay behind. But the moment they'd vanished into the storm, leaving the mansion's lights behind, something inside her snapped. Maybe it was frustration, maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the quiet, simmering anger at being treated like a fragile piece of glass when the danger was about her. So she followed. Carefully, quietly, keeping her distance. At least at first. But the further into the forest they went, the darker it grew. the trees thick overhead, the rain dripping down in cold rivulets, the wind carrying distant snarls that made her pulse race. She tried to keep her footing as the ground turned slick beneath her boots. Her shawl was soaked, clinging to her shoulders, but she didn't dare stop, not until she knew the truth, not until she saw for herself who wanted her dead, and why. Ethan reached the enemy camp before she did. From her hiding spot behind a tangle of fallen logs, Selena saw the faint orange glow of firelight through the trees. The camp was small, 6 tents, crates marked with symbols she didn't recognize, a crude map pinned to a tree trunk, and wolves, 3, maybe 4 of them, moving restlessly near the fire, weapons strapped to their backs. But something was wrong. They didn't look like rogues. Rogues were wild, unmarked, untethered by any alpha's control. These wolves had formation, discipline, and the weapons, silver-edged blades, crossbows tipped with something that gleamed even in the rain, were too well kept, too organized. This wasn't some rogue pack living off scraps in the woods. This was an army in miniature, waiting, watching. Ethan stepped into the clearing like the storm itself had taken human shape, broad-shouldered, rain dripping from his dark hair, golden eyes burning in the firelight. The camp went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Stormrider," one of the wolves said finally, his voice mocking. "Big Alpha Lord himself. Come to get wet?" Ethan didn't answer. He walked forward slowly, the rain hissing off his shoulders, his men fanning out behind him in a silent, deadly line. "Who sent you?" Ethan said, voice low but carrying through the storm. The lead wolf smirked. "Maybe we just like the view. Pretty little mansion up there. Pretty little—" He didn't finish. Ethan moved too fast. 1 second he was standing there, the next his hand was at the wolf's throat, slamming him against a tree so hard the trunk cracked. The others snarled, shifting halfway before Ethan's warriors cut them off, teeth bared, weapons drawn. "Try it," Ethan growled without looking back, his voice so cold it froze the air itself. "And you'll die before you take your next breath." The wolf choked, claws scraping at Ethan's wrist. "Who sent you?" Ethan repeated softly. The wolf laughed, even as blood trickled down his lip. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Ethan's hand tightened. Selena flinched from her hiding spot, because she could feel it, the alpha power rolling off him in waves, thick and heavy, making the air hard to breathe. She'd seen him angry before. This was different. This was personal. Lightning split the sky overhead, and in that flash, one of the other wolves' eyes flicked past Ethan, straight toward the trees where Selena was hiding. Her stomach dropped. Oh no. Before she could move, one of them broke formation, snarling as he lunged into the trees. Straight for her. Selena scrambled back, heart slamming against her ribs. She grabbed a fallen branch, swinging wildly as the wolf crashed through the underbrush, only for a blur of motion to cut between them. Ethan. He hit the wolf so hard they rolled across the ground, teeth snapping, claws raking, until Ethan slammed him down and shifted mid-motion, his own wolf exploding from his skin in a flash of fur and muscle. Selena froze, breath shallow. She'd never seen his wolf before. He was massive, dark as the storm, eyes glowing like molten gold, his size alone dwarfing the other wolf by half, and he was furious. The fight ended in seconds, blood spraying, the other wolf yelping as Ethan's jaws closed over his shoulder, before tossing him aside like a rag doll. The clearing went dead silent. Ethan turned, gold eyes locking on Selena through the rain and shadows, and oh, he was angry. Not just at the wolves, at her. By the time the last of the enemy wolves retreated into the trees, the storm was beginning to break, thunder fading, rain softening to a drizzle. Ethan shifted back, his men already gathering the crates of weapons, maps, and whatever else the enemy had left behind. Selena stood very, very still as he stalked toward her, bare-chested, rain dripping down muscles marked with fresh scratches from the fight. "Do you have any idea," he said, voice low and dangerous, "what you just did?" Selena lifted her chin, even as her pulse pounded. "I wanted to see for myself. You could have been killed. But I wasn't," she shot back. Lightning might as well have cracked between them, because the look he gave her was pure fury wrapped around something hotter, darker. He stepped closer, so close the heat of him swallowed the rain-chilled air between them. "Next time," Ethan murmured, voice rough as gravel, "you don't disobey me. Not about this. Not when it's your life on the line." Selena's breath caught. Because beneath the anger was something else, something possessive and raw, like the thought of losing her had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Back at the mansion, the captured map lay spread across the war room table, rainwater dripping from its corners, and there, scrawled in bold black ink across the center, was a name, one Selena hadn't heard in years, one that made her blood run cold: Nightfang, her grandmother's old rival, the alpha who'd once sworn the blood moon line would end with her family, or burn the world trying, and he was supposed to be dead. Chapter 9. The war room at Stormrider Estate was silent, except for the rain still dripping from the edges of the captured map. The name scrawled across it felt like a ghost crawling out of the past: Nightfang. Selena's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the ink-stained letters. Nightfang wasn't just any enemy. He was legend and nightmare wrapped into one. A name mothers whispered when they told their pups why they stayed within the safety of the pack borders. And according to every tale she'd ever heard, he was dead. Impossible, she said, voice low but trembling at the edges. Nightfang died years ago. My grandmother saw to it herself. Ethan stood at the head of the table, arms crossed over his chest, muscles tense under the dim glow of the chandelier. His golden eyes never left the map. Dead men don't send trained soldiers after heirs to the blood moon line, he said. Either someone's using his name, or he's alive, Selena finished softly. The thought sent a shiver racing down her spine. Because if Nightfang truly lived, it meant war wasn't coming. It was already here. As the warriors around the table began murmuring, Ethan gestured sharply for silence. The room obeyed instantly, his presence demanding it like the weight of thunder before a storm. Nightfang swore vengeance against your family after your grandmother banished him, he said, finally looking at Selena. If he's back, you're not just a target, you're the prize. Selena stiffened. The prize? Ethan's gaze softened for half a heartbeat before turning hard again. Your bloodline, Selena. You're the last living heir of the blood moon line. If Nightfang takes you, mating, binding, using you to legitimize his claim, he gets everything he lost. Packs, territory, power. Selena's stomach twisted violently. The thought of being used like that made bile rise in her throat. No, she said fiercely. I won't let him. I won't. Ethan stepped closer before she could finish, his hand gripping the edge of the table as his golden eyes locked on hers. You won't have a choice, he said softly, dangerously. Not if he gets to you first. The words landed heavy. Because she knew he was right. Later, when the warriors dispersed to strengthen the estate's defenses, Ethan stopped her before she could slip out of the room. Stay, he said. It wasn't a command this time, but somehow it felt heavier than one. Selena hesitated. The fire in the hearth crackled between them, throwing shadows across his face, turning him into something out of an ancient story. Alpha, Lord, and Stormbringer, protector and danger bound in one. Why me? She whispered finally. Why not take the fight to him, end this before it begins? Ethan's jaw flexed, his eyes unreadable. Because right now, you're what he wants, and if I lose you... He stopped himself. Selena's heart pounded in the silence that followed. If I lose you... The words coiled through her like heat and warning all at once. She tried to look away, but Ethan stepped closer, slow enough to give her the chance to back away. She didn't. You don't understand, Selena, he said softly, the low rasp of his voice threading under her skin. I swore I wouldn't let anyone take you. Not him, not anyone. You're under my protection. Selena's breath caught. Because under the fierce promise in his voice, there was something else too. Something rougher. Something like want. That night, restless and unable to sleep, Selena found herself wandering the west wing of the estate, a part few dared to go after dark. The corridors were lined with old portraits, tapestries woven with battles and moons and wolves standing beneath star-strewn skies. And then she found the door, carved with the blood moon crest. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old magic. Scrolls lined the walls. A single moonstone crystal glowed faintly in the center of the room, casting silver light over an open prophecy tablet. Selena stepped closer, heart thudding. The words were written in the old language, the one her grandmother used to mutter when she thought no one was listening. but Selena recognized enough of the symbols to understand the bones of it. The blood moon heir shall be bound by darkness before the dawn, claimed by the wolf who carries the storm in his veins, or the night shall rise eternal. Her breath trembled out. Claimed by the wolf who carries the storm in his veins. She didn't want to think about why her mind immediately pictured Ethan. She nearly jumped when the door creaked behind her. Ethan stood there, hair damp from the rain, shirt unbuttoned at the throat like he'd thrown it on in a hurry. His gaze flicked from her to the glowing tablet, then back again. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. Selena lifted her chin. "It mentions the heir." "Me. Don't I have the right to know?" Ethan stepped inside, his presence filling the small room until the walls themselves seemed to draw closer. "This prophecy has been twisted 100 times over the years," he said. "People kill for it. People die for it. Don't let it chain you before you understand it." But Selena's pulse skittered because his eyes burned gold in the moonstone light, and the words claimed by the wolf hummed in her bones like a drumbeat. She couldn't tell if it was fear she felt, or something far more dangerous. Neither of them slept that night. Because just before dawn, the guards sounded the alarm. Shapes moved in the tree line beyond the estate walls, too many to be scouts, too bold to be ordinary rogues, and among them, for the first time in decades, a single banner unfurled in the wind. Black, silver claw mark slashing through the center, Nightfang's sigil. Chapter 10. The night smelled of iron and rain. Selena stood at the high balcony of Stormrider Estate, her hands gripping the cold stone rail as the warning bells echoed through the valley below. The storm had finally broken, leaving the air thick with mist, every leaf dripping silver in the moonlight. And beyond the gates the shadows gathered. Dozens, no, hundreds. Eyes glowed faintly red between the trees, wolves armored and armed, carrying the black banner with the silver claw slash that made Selena's blood run cold. Nightfang's forces. It was no longer rumor or prophecy or threat whispered in the dark. This was war. Behind her, the heavy doors opened. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. Ethan's presence always filled a space like fire and thunder rolling in together, heat and danger braided tight enough to steal the air from her lungs. "Selena." His voice was low, rougher than usual, like the night itself had sharpened his edges. "It's time to get you below. The West Wing cellars are reinforced. You'll be safe there until—" No. The word left her before she even thought about it. Ethan stilled behind her. "No?" Selena turned, heart hammering, eyes burning like wildfire despite the fear coiled in her chest. "I won't hide while people fight for me," she said, voice shaking but stubborn. "I'm not a child, Ethan. If this is about me, if Nightfang wants me, that's exactly why you stay out of sight," he growled, stepping closer, his golden eyes flashing like lightning across a storm-swept sky. "Do you have any idea what they'll do to you if they get through those gates?" "I won't risk it, Selena." "Not you." The words burned through her, fierce and raw. Not you, as though the thought of losing her was something he couldn't bear to shape into sound. Selena didn't back away when he closed the space between them. The air seemed to thicken, the whole world narrowing until it was just him, broad shoulders tense beneath his dark shirt, rain dripping from the ends of his hair, jaw locked like he was holding himself back from saying, or doing, too much. "Why do you care so much?" she asked before she could stop herself. "I'm just the heir of a dying packline to you, a political piece in a war that started before either of us was born." Ethan's eyes burned hotter. "You think this is politics?" he asked softly, dangerously. "You think I'm standing here ready to tear apart anyone who touches you because of politics?" Selena's breath caught. His hand lifted, slow, like he was giving her every chance to stop him, before brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was gentle, too gentle for a man carved from storm and fire. "I care," Ethan said quietly, "because every time you look at me like that, I feel like I've been waiting centuries for you and didn't even know it." The words rooted her to the spot. Heat bloomed low in her chest, tangled with fear, longing, disbelief. But before she could say anything, the horns outside blared again, closer this time. The siege had begun. The next hour was chaos wrapped in silver moonlight. Nightfang's forces swarmed the outer walls like a tide of teeth and claws, their howls shaking the trees as Stormrider warriors clashed with them in a blur of fur, steel, and blood. Ethan shifted mid-charge, his wolf exploding from his skin like darkness come alive, massive and terrifying, golden eyes blazing as he tore through the enemy lines with feral precision. Selena watched from the inner courtyard, heart slamming against her ribs, because she couldn't stay locked in the cellar like he'd ordered. She couldn't. And when the first wave broke through the gates, she didn't run. She fought. Grabbing a fallen spear from one of the guards, she swung with every ounce of strength she had, forcing back the wolf that lunged too close, even as claws raked across her arm and fire-hot pain burned through her skin. Ethan saw. Oh, he saw. And something snapped in him. The next thing she knew, he was there. His wolf ripping through the attacker with such brutal ferocity the others hesitated before coming closer. He shifted back, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arms as he caught Selena by the shoulders. "Are you insane?" His voice was raw, thunderous, shaking with something deeper than anger. "I told you to stay hidden." Selena's arm throbbed where the claws had caught her, but she glared back fiercely. "I won't sit in the dark while people die for me, Ethan." Lightning cracked overhead, the rain coming harder now, turning the courtyard into mud and blood and smoke from burning oil. Ethan looked like he was about to roar at her again, then his gaze dropped to her bleeding arm, and everything changed. "Hold still," he growled, dragging her toward the inner hall even as the fighting raged on outside. She resisted. "I'm fine. You're bleeding," he snapped, slamming the door behind them before shoving her gently but firmly against the stone wall. The sudden closeness stole the breath from her lungs. Rain dripped from his hair onto her cheek, his hands braced on either side of her head, his chest rising and falling like he was still half a breath from losing control. "You scare me when you do that," he said finally, voice low, hoarse. "When you run toward danger like you don't care what happens to you." Selena's heart pounded because she heard it in his voice. Raw, unpolished fear under all that alpha steel, and something inside her cracked. "I care," she whispered back, "more than you know." His eyes darkened. He leaned in slowly like the storm outside had wrapped around them both and was dragging them toward something inevitable. The world shrank to his breath mingling with hers, the smell of rain and blood and smoke curling between them. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but his forehead pressed to hers, his voice rough and shaking as he said, "When this is over, Selena, we're going to talk about what's happening between us, what this is." Her pulse thudded in her ears. And for the first time since the siege began, she wanted the danger to end, just so she could hear what he'd say next. Before either of them could move, a new howl split the air. Deep, cold, carrying across the battlefield like a curse. Selena froze. Because this one wasn't like the others, it was older, stronger, and when the enemy forces pulled back suddenly, parting like a tide, she saw him at last. A massive black wolf, silver claw marks slashing across his chest like a brand, Nightfang, alive, and staring straight at her. Chapter 11. The battlefield went still. The rain fell softer now, like the storm itself was holding its breath. The wolves on both sides froze where they stood, eyes flicking between the alpha lord of Stormrider and the dark shadow of legend stepping out from the tree line. Nightfang, the name that had haunted packfires for decades, now had a body. A towering wolf with black fur streaked by old scars, muscles corded thick under the moonlight. His silver-marked chest gleamed like a war banner made flesh, and those eyes, gods above, those eyes, ancient and burning red, locked straight on Selena like she was the only thing left in the world worth seeing. Selena's pulse slammed hard enough to hurt. This couldn't be real. Nightfang was supposed to be dead. Inside, Ethan snapped, his voice sharp as steel. He hadn't shifted back yet. His massive wolf form stood between Selena and Nightfang like a wall of muscle and fury, golden eyes blazing. Selena shook her head. "I'm not leaving." "Yes, you are," Ethan growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. "This isn't a fight you stay to watch, Selena." She opened her mouth to argue, but the way he looked at her, desperate, furious, like the thought of her anywhere near Nightfang made his blood boil, silenced her words. His wolf's head lowered, teeth flashing, and then Nightfang spoke, not in growls, not in the snarling language of wolves, but in a deep human voice that rolled across the courtyard like thunder. Blood Moon's last daughter. Selena flinched. Nightfang's wolf shape shifted as he stalked forward, the black fur retreating until he stood there in human form. A man with black hair, eyes still glowing red, scars striping his chest like stories carved into flesh. "You look so much like her," Nightfang said softly, almost reverently. "Your grandmother. The one who thought she could kill me." "She should have finished the job," Ethan snarled, finally shifting back, his own body bristling with power as he stepped forward, blocking Nightfang's view of Selena. Nightfang smiled, slow, cold. "Stormrider," he said, "the lapdog alpha who thinks power comes from gold and walls and titles. Stand aside. The girl comes with me." Selena's heart lurched violently. Ethan didn't move, not an inch. "She's under my protection," Ethan said, voice low but carrying like a blade slicing through air. "And she's not going anywhere with you." Nightfang tilted his head, studying him. Then softly, "Then you'll die for her." The first clash happened so fast Selena barely saw it. 1 second, the two alphas were standing there. The next, they were wolves mid-air. Black and gold fur colliding with a sound like thunder cracking open the night. The courtyard erupted into chaos again, but Selena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Ethan was huge in his wolf form, his muscles corded with power, golden eyes blazing as his teeth sank deep into Nightfang's shoulder. Nightfang fought like the old stories said he would, feral, unyielding, every strike precise and meant to kill. Stone shattered under their claws, blood sprayed as they tore into each other, the storm above breaking open again in sheets of rain and lightning. Selena's nails bit into her own palms because she wanted to run to Ethan, to scream, to do something, but she couldn't. This was alpha business, and alphas fought to the death. At some point, the battle pushed them dangerously close to the inner walls, where Selena stood frozen. Nightfang slammed Ethan down hard enough to shake the ground, his massive jaws snapping inches from Ethan's throat. "No!" Selena didn't realize she'd screamed until both wolves' heads jerked toward her voice. For a split second, Nightfang's burning red gaze met hers again, and something flickered there. Possession, promise, victory, as though he already believed she belonged to him. Ethan surged back with a snarl that shook the rain itself, rage turning him into something wild as he drove Nightfang across the courtyard, teeth flashing, claws raking, until both were rolling in a blur of fur and blood again. At last, Nightfang wrenched free, black fur slick with crimson, his eyes still burning. But instead of pressing the fight, he backed toward the shattered gates, never looking away from Selena. "This isn't over," he called over the rain, his voice carrying like prophecy. "The blood moon heir will be mine before the next full moon rises, and the storm wolf can't protect you forever." Then he vanished into the trees, his forces scattering after him. The courtyard was left in ruins, bodies, blood, broken weapons scattered across the mud and stone. Selena ran forward before anyone could stop her. "Ethan!" He shifted back slowly, his chest heaving, golden eyes still bright with the fight's fury as he stood amid the wreckage. Blood streaked his arms and chest, some his, most not. "Are you hurt?" she asked breathlessly, reaching for him before she thought better of it. His hand caught hers first, big, warm, shaking faintly. "I'm fine," he said hoarsely. Then, quieter, "But you shouldn't have been here." Selena stared up at him, rain sliding down both their faces, the world around them fading until there was only the heat of his hand around hers. "I wasn't leaving you," she whispered. Something broke in his expression. He tugged her closer, rain slick and shaking, until she was pressed against his chest, his breath hot against her ear as he murmured, "You drive me mad, Selena. Do you know that?" Her pulse skittered. "Do I?" "Yes," he growled softly. "And one of these nights, when there isn't blood and war between us, you're going to answer for it." She didn't know if it was a threat or a promise, and she didn't care. Because for the first time she realized she wanted him to. Chapter 12. The rain had stopped by the time the courtyard fires were put out. Stormrider Estate stood battered but unbroken, its walls streaked with blood and rainwater, the air still heavy with smoke, and the metallic scent of battle. Selena moved like she was in a dream, her body running on instinct as she followed Ethan inside. The healers rushed forward with herbs and bandages, but Ethan waved them off, his golden eyes never leaving her face. "Bring supplies to my chambers," he said, his voice low, steady, but edged with something deeper. The warriors obeyed without question. And that was how Selena found herself in the Alpha Lord's private rooms, the door closing softly behind them, the crackle of the hearth throwing gold across the shadows. Ethan stripped his ruined shirt off without a word. Selena swallowed hard. She'd seen him fight. She'd seen him bleed. But here, in the firelight, she saw all of him, every hard line of muscle, every scar carved like history across his skin. Some of the wounds were shallow, already clotting. Others oozed sluggishly, crimson running over the ridges of his ribs. "Sit," she said softly. He obeyed, dropping into the chair by the fire. She could feel his gaze tracking her every movement as she gathered cloths and warm water, her hands trembling despite herself. "You shouldn't be the one doing this," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Who else will?" she murmured, wringing out a cloth. "You terrify half your healers." He huffed a low laugh, then hissed softly as she pressed the cloth to his side. "Hold still," she scolded. "I am holding still. Then stop glaring at me like I'm one of Nightfang's soldiers." His eyes softened a little, the golden fire dimming as he studied her face. "You were brave tonight," he said after a moment. Selena didn't look at him. "I was reckless. Both can be true." She pressed the cloth harder than necessary. He grunted but didn't pull away. When the worst of the blood was gone, Selena reached for the salve the healer had left, a thick, bitter-smelling paste meant to draw out infection. Ethan caught her wrist before she could dip her fingers into it. Selena froze. His hand was warm, calloused, completely enveloping hers. "You're shaking," he said softly. She pulled back like she'd been burned. "It's been a long night." He leaned back, watching her through the firelight. "You saw him, Nightfang." Selena nodded, throat tight. "He looked at you like—" Ethan stopped, jaw clenching. "Like you were already his." Selena swallowed hard. "But I'm not," she whispered. The air between them thickened. Ethan's gaze burned hotter, something raw and possessive flickering there before he dragged it back under control. "You're under my protection," he said, low, fierce. "Do you understand that, Selena? As long as I breathe, no one takes you. Not Nightfang, not anyone." The words coiled through her like heat and danger and safety all tangled together. She nodded slowly. She meant to go back to tending his wounds. Truly she did. But when she leaned closer, the firelight glinting off his skin, the scent of rain and smoke and alpha musk curling around her, something in the air snapped. One moment she was pressing salve to a cut along his ribs, the next his hand caught her wrist again, harder this time. "Ethan, tell me to stop," he rasped, golden eyes locked on hers, voice shaking with the effort it took to hold back. "Because if you don't, Selena, I won't." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't tell him to stop. The first kiss wasn't gentle. It was months, no, lifetimes, of hunger and restraint breaking all at once, his mouth crushing against hers like he'd been drowning since the day they met, and she was the only air left in the world. Selena made a sound low in her throat, her hands sliding over his shoulders as he dragged her into his lap, his fingers fisting in her rain-damp hair. Gods above, he was heat everywhere, his mouth claiming hers, his body hard beneath hers, his heartbeat hammering against her palms where they pressed to his chest. The chair scraped back as he stood suddenly, lifting her like she weighed nothing, carrying her across the room without breaking the kiss. Selena clung to him, breathless, the world spinning as he laid her down on the bed, his mouth trailing fire along her jaw, her throat, the hollow of her collarbone. "Ethan," she whispered, half a plea, half a warning. He braced himself over her, muscles trembling with restraint. "Last chance," he growled against her skin. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. Clothes vanished slowly, almost reverently, as though each piece marked another layer falling away between them. His hands were everywhere, mapping, learning, worshipping. And when she arched into his touch, a low, feral sound rumbled from his chest like he'd been starving for her. The firelight painted them in gold and shadow as his mouth found hers again, softer this time, deeper, until she was drowning in him in the heat and weight and sheer need of him. When he finally pushed into her, it was slow, careful, his forehead pressed to hers like he was afraid he'd break her if he moved too fast. But then she gasped his name, clutching at his shoulders, and his control snapped. The world blurred into heat and motion, and the sound of their breaths tangling together as he moved above her, inside her, claiming and worshipping and losing himself all at once. It was wild. It was endless. It was the kind of night that burned itself into bone and blood, the kind that changed everything after. When it was over, they lay tangled in the sheets, the fire burned low, the storm outside finally quiet. Ethan's hand traced slow, absent circles on her back, his breath warm against her hair. "Selena," he murmured, voice hoarse. She shifted sleepily against him. "When this war is over," he said softly, "I'm not letting you go." And for the first time in weeks, Selena slept without dreaming of blood. Chapter 13. The first thing Selena felt was warmth, not the dying fire crackling faintly in the hearth, nor the soft weight of furs draped over her body, but the steady, solid heat of the man lying beside her, Ethan. She blinked awake slowly, her cheek pressed against the broad expanse of his chest, his arm heavy around her waist. The alpha lord of Stormrider slept like he lived, possessively, even in unconsciousness, his entire body curled protectively around hers, as though the night itself might try to steal her away. Selena lay there for a long moment, listening to the deep, even rhythm of his heartbeat. Last night felt like it existed outside of time. The world beyond these walls had been blood and fire and prophecy. Inside this room it had been heat and hands and his mouth on her skin, until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. And now, in the pale gray light of dawn, she didn't know what came next. Ethan stirred when she tried to slip from the bed. "Where are you going?" His voice was rough with sleep, deep and low in a way that made her heart stumble. Selena paused, fingers curling in the fur blanket. "I thought I should leave before anyone sees me." One golden eye cracked open. "Let them see." Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Ethan." He caught her wrist before she could rise, tugging her gently back down until she was sprawled against his chest again. "I meant what I said last night," he murmured, his mouth brushing her hair. "I'm not letting you go, Selena. Not now. Not after this." Her heart twisted painfully, because even as she wanted to believe him, to sink into the safety of his arms and pretend the world outside didn't exist, she knew it wasn't that simple. Nightfang's promise from the courtyard still echoed like distant thunder. "The blood moon heir will be mine." By midday, word had spread. Selena could feel the stares as she and Ethan entered the council hall together. The Stormrider warriors, hard men with harder eyes, didn't whisper openly, but the weight of their curiosity pressed like a physical thing. They'd seen her arrive months ago as a refugee. They'd seen Ethan claim her as under his protection. Now, after last night, nothing about that protection looked platonic anymore. Ethan didn't seem to care. He strode into the council chamber like he owned it because he did, his hand resting lightly but unmistakably at the small of her back. Lord Charon, the grizzled beta who'd fought beside Ethan since they were boys, raised one weathered brow. "You're late." Ethan dropped into the alpha's chair at the head of the table. "I was busy." Charon's gaze flicked to Selena, then back to Ethan. "So I hear." Selena flushed hotly but said nothing, sliding into the seat beside Ethan as the war council began. Maps spread across the table. Markers showed where Nightfang's forces had struck in the night. Small villages along the border, isolated farms. "He's testing our defenses," Charon said grimly, "picking off the weak before he comes for the strong." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He won't have long before we strike back." But Selena barely heard them. Her eyes were on the map, on the red circle Charon had drawn around one name she didn't recognize. "Blackthorn Keep," Charon said when he noticed her staring. "Old fortress, long abandoned." He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Our scouts saw Nightfang's army moving there. Looks like he means to make it his stronghold." Selena's stomach turned cold. Because even from here, the keep's location was clear. Perched high on the cliffs under the path of the full moon. Blood moon. She didn't know how she knew. She just knew. That place mattered. And whatever Nightfang planned there, it was about her. That evening, Ethan found her alone on the balcony outside her chambers. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke from the training fields below. "You're quiet," he said softly, stepping up beside her. Selena gripped the stone railing. "I saw the map." His golden eyes flicked over her face. And I think Blackthorn Keep is where this ends." Her throat tightened. "For all of us." He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out, fingers tilting her chin until she met his gaze. "I won't let him take you," he said fiercely. "Do you understand? He'll have to kill me first." Something in his voice cracked through her composure, through the fear coiled tight in her chest since the battle. Selena turned toward him slowly, the wind tugging at her hair, and whispered, "Last night, was it only because of the war?" Ethan's eyes burned into hers. "No," he said, voice low and certain. "It was because I'm yours, war or no war." And then he kissed her again, slow and deep this time, not like the storm of last night, but like a promise carved into bone and blood. They didn't hear the messenger until he stumbled breathless into the hall behind them. "My lord," he gasped, falling to one knee. "From the border, news of Nightfang." Ethan turned sharply. "What news?" The messenger swallowed hard. "He's taken 3 villages, and left no survivors." Selena's blood ran cold. Nightfang wasn't waiting anymore. He was coming, and he was coming soon. Chapter 14. The moon rose heavy and red over the mountains. Selena had never seen it like this before, so close it seemed to breathe over the jagged horizon, bleeding light across the forest as though the sky itself had opened a vein. Blood moon. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. The ride toward Blackthorn Keep was silent but tense. Ethan rode at the head of the column, his great black warhorse kicking up dirt as the Stormrider warriors thundered behind him. Selena rode close to his side, her cloak whipping around her like a shadow in the wind. She hadn't spoken since the messenger brought news of the villages. She hadn't needed to. The time for fear had passed. Now there was only what waited for them in the mountains. 2 nights before, she'd found the old scroll in the Stormrider library. "When the blood moon bleeds the sky, the heir of its fire shall rise, one wolf bound by gold and storm, one by shadow and blood. Only the chosen mate shall tip the scale before night devours the sun." At first she hadn't understood, but now she could feel its meaning burning under her skin. Nightfang wanted her because of this. Because if the prophecy was true, whoever claimed her, heart, soul, bond, would win the war written in the stars, and she already knew where her choice lay. Her eyes slid to Ethan riding beside her, his golden gaze fixed ahead, his jaw tight with grim purpose. Whatever else happened tonight, she would not let fate hand her over to the monster waiting in those ruins. They reached it just before midnight. The fortress rose out of the cliffs like the bones of some ancient beast, jagged towers clawing at the sky. Lightning forked behind it, throwing the broken walls into sharp relief. Selena shivered as they dismounted. The air here felt wrong, heavy, like the earth itself didn't want them here. Ethan gave the order, his voice carrying over the wind. Warriors spread out, drive his forces back into the keep. We end this tonight. And then the gates exploded outward. Nightfang's wolves came like a flood of shadow. The clash was chaos, claws, steel, teeth flashing in the blood-red moonlight. Selena barely had time to react before Ethan shifted mid-leap, his massive golden wolf slamming into a black-furred attacker with bone-crushing force. The battlefield became a blur of fur and blood and lightning. Selena fought too, bow in hand, arrows whistling through the night. She wasn't Stormrider born, but she'd trained for this moment, and she would not stand idle while others bled for her. Through the carnage she caught glimpses of Ethan, golden fur streaked crimson, carving a path straight toward the keep's shattered doors, toward Nightfang. The throne room of Blackthorn Keep was nothing but ruin and shadows when they burst inside, and there he was. Nightfang stood at the far end, tall and terrible, his red eyes burning in the half-light. Around him, what remained of his army circled like wolves scenting blood. He smiled when he saw Selena. "Blood Moon's heir," he said softly, like greeting an old friend. "Come to fulfill your destiny?" Selena lifted her chin. "You'll never have me." His smile widened. "Oh, child, you think it's about you choosing? The moon chose long ago." "Then it chose wrong," Ethan snarled, stalking forward, his body vibrating with the need to tear Nightfang apart. But Nightfang's gaze slid back to Selena. "Tell me," he murmured, "when he falls, and he will fall, will you scream for him, Or will you come quietly when the bond calls you home?" Something inside Selena snapped. "No," she said fiercely, stepping up beside Ethan, her voice ringing through the hall. "I am the heir, and I choose him. Not you. Never you." The prophecy flared like fire in her blood as she spoke, the words slamming into the air like iron doors closing, and then the fight began. They shifted at once, Ethan's golden wolf and Nightfang's black one colliding with a sound like thunder cracking the world in half. It was savage. Teeth tearing, claws raking, the floor itself shattering beneath them as they slammed into walls, into pillars, into each other again and again. Selena wanted to look away. She couldn't. Because this wasn't just a fight for victory, it was for her, for the prophecy, for everything. The battle raged until Ethan, bloodied but unbroken, drove Nightfang back toward the jagged edge of the throne room where the wall had fallen away into the cliffs below. Lightning split the sky as Ethan lunged, his jaws closing on Nightfang's throat in a single brutal motion, and then the black wolf toppled into the abyss, his body vanishing into the storm below. Silence fell. Ethan shifted back slowly, chest heaving, blood streaking his arms and chest. His golden eyes found Selena through the wreckage, something raw and unguarded flickering there. And she knew. The prophecy wasn't just about battle. It was about this, about choosing, about binding her fate to his before the moon bled itself out. Selena crossed the room, ignoring the pain in her limbs, the cuts on her skin, and threw her arms around him. "I choose you," she whispered fiercely against his chest. "I'll always choose you." The storm outside began to break. Chapter 15. The storm had passed. The sky over Blackthorn Keep burned soft gold and rose as the sun crept over the mountains, washing away the blood and shadows of the night before. The ruins still smoked faintly. The air reeked of iron and ash. But the war was over. Nightfang was gone. His army scattered, broken, retreating into the wilds where no banner flew. For the first time in months, maybe years, the land of wolves stood quiet. Selena stood on the broken balcony where Nightfang had fallen, the wind tugging at her hair. The world stretched endlessly below. It didn't feel real. The battle, the prophecy, the choice she'd made under the bleeding moonlight. Ethan found her there, silent as the dawn itself, his steps heavy but sure. "You should be resting," she murmured without turning. "So should you," he said, his voice low and rough from the fight, from everything. She looked at him then, at the dried blood on his arms, the bruises blossoming along his ribs, the exhaustion carved into his golden eyes, and her chest ached. "You could have died," she whispered, his mouth curved faintly, "but I didn't." Selena wanted to be angry at him for saying it like it was that simple. She wanted to scream about how close she'd come to losing him, but instead she just stepped into his arms, burying her face against his chest as his hand came up to cradle the back of her head. The world could wait. For now, she just needed this. The victory feast was held that night in Stormrider's great hall, the long tables crowded with warriors, allies, even former rivals who had come to see the end of Nightfang's reign. Selena wore Stormrider colors now, deep blue and silver, though no official words had yet been spoken about what she and Ethan were to each other. But everyone saw the way his eyes followed her across the hall, the way his hand always seemed to find hers beneath the table, the way the entire room quieted when Ethan rose, his golden gaze sweeping the hall. "Tonight," he said, his voice carrying like thunder across the rafters, "we honor the fallen, we rebuild what was broken, and we look to the future, a future where no tyrant's shadow rules these lands again." The hall roared with approval, but Selena barely heard them, because Ethan had turned toward her then, his hand reaching, his eyes burning with something that felt older than the moon itself. "Come with me," he murmured, low enough for only her. The night was quiet when he led her beyond the walls, to the silver-lit clearing where the Stormrider wolves had taken their oaths for generations. The moon had waned since the battle, now a thin pale crescent above the treetops. But it was enough. Ethan turned to her slowly, his face raw with everything he didn't say easily. "You chose me under the blood moon," he said softly. "But if you let me, I'll bind myself to you tonight. Completely. No turning back." Selena's breath caught. In wolf law, the bond was sacred, a vow spoken under moonlight, witnessed by stars and earth alike. Stronger than marriage, stronger than blood, unbreakable. Yes, she whispered. I want that. I want you. His eyes closed briefly, like he was steadying himself. And then he spoke the words, ancient and steady, promising his life, his loyalty, his soul to hers, as long as the moon rose and the rivers ran. Selena repeated them, her voice shaking but certain. When it was done, Ethan kissed her slow and deep beneath the watching stars, sealing the vow in the way of their kind. For the first time, Selena felt it, the bond snapping into place like a thread of fire tying them together. Hers, forever. They returned to the hall long after midnight, the world quiet and at peace for the first time in what felt like forever. Selena thought she could finally breathe again. But then the messenger came. He stumbled into the torchlight, pale and wild-eyed, clutching a scroll marked with the seal of the northern clans. "My lord," he gasped, barely catching his breath. "It's the Alpha of Frostfang hold," he says. Ethan broke the seal sharply. Selena watched his eyes flick across the page, saw his jaw tighten. "What is it?" she asked softly. Ethan lifted his gaze, golden eyes dark with new storm clouds. "They found a body," he said slowly, "at the edge of the Frostfang cliffs." Selena's pulse stuttered. Whose body? Ethan's mouth was a hard line. "They say it was Nightfang." Relief flared, brief, blinding, before she saw the way Ethan's hands clenched around the message. "What is it?" she whispered again. He looked at her then, voice grim. "They say..." His body was torn apart. Not by wolves, by something worse. And there were tracks, huge ones, leading north. The hall fell silent as his words sank in. And outside, far to the north where the mountains split the sky, the wind carried a low, inhuman howl that didn't belong to any wolf. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Kindly comment below if you loved it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.